Hello there. Armored Core 6 is an upcoming mecha game by From Software, the studio behind titles like Kingsfield and Kuon, and also Dark Souls and Elden Ring. After lying dormant for a decade,
we're close to Rubicon. Wake the dog up.
The Armored Core series is back with Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. I recently attended an Armored Core 6 preview event in Anaheim, California. There I got to play and capture footage of the game for about 5 hours, get questions answered by producer Yasunori Ogura and director Masaru Yamamura, and watch a real-life mech wreck a car. I got to play the first chapter of Armored Core 6 in its entirety, which consisted of 11 main missions, 7 tutorial missions, and 3 arena fights. This is about 20% of the game according to director Yamamura. In this video I'm discussing my impressions of the gameplay and story, as well as sharing new information learned from the producer and director.
Time to get to work, 621.
I'd like to start by discussing my impressions of the story. The Armored Core series has historically rebooted the narrative every few numbered entries, and Armored Core 6 is another fresh start, although there are plenty of nods toward past titles for fans to discover. I will not and am not allowed to spoil any major plot beats, so these will be general impressions, but I will share an early cinematic that establishes the premise.
Coral, a sublime substance. Discovered on Rubicon, a planet on the frontier of developed space. For a time, coral was a revolutionary energy resource and data conduit, poised to transform human society by leaps and bounds. They called it the Fires of Ibis, a storm of flame that tore through the stars, leaving lethal contamination in its wake. Coral, the kindling, was thought to have been utterly consumed, forever lost. However, on Rubicon, the embers continued to burn. Humanity would inevitably return to stoke the fire.
So basically, Rubicon 3 has a valuable substance called coral, and corporations are in a race to harvest it from the planet, disregarding the impact and danger this poses to the local population who are resisting this invasion. Sounds like somebody watched Dune. You are augmented human 621, who for reasons yet unknown, illegally arrive on Rubicon and take on the identity of another AC pilot.
Why hide behind another's call sign?
This is orchestrated by the enigmatic handler Walter, who sent you here to get your hands on Rubicon's coral, promising that you'll make plenty of money on it, or at least enough for a merc with a fried brain to buy your life back. I'd say handler Walter is definitely up to more than he lets on though. Walter's motives, your identity, and what exactly is going on with coral form the narrative hook and through line for your missions, and I found these mysteries compelling. For anyone familiar with the series, it won't be surprising to learn that the scenarios and the missions largely consist of being employed by various corporations to undermine the competition and put down resistance from the local population in one mission, and then help the competition and support the local population in the next mission. As with previous Armored Core titles, you are a mercenary in a hyper-capitalist society. You take the work you're given, or in this entry, the work handler Walter gives you. And in line with the series, there is fun in reading between the lines of deceptive corporate speak and other AC pilots' dialogue, and working all sides starts to form a holistic understanding of what's really going on between the various forces. Over the last decade, From Software's games, whether it be Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, or Elden Ring, have all had a similar approach to storytelling. You've had your cast of melancholy weirdos giggling at you as they obliquely explain their situation and allude to the history of the ruined world you find yourself in. Item descriptions and environmental storytelling provided pieces of the puzzle, and your interpretation and imagination provided the missing pieces. The plot was relatively minimal in deference to the world building and mythological past, so I think understandably I wondered if this approach over the last decade would change the approach to storytelling in Armored Core 6 and present a more somber story featuring a more morose cast of characters and a greater focus on exploring the desolation of Rubicon by the fires of Ibis with a less complicated plot. To my delight, this is not the case. Armored Core 6, similar to its predecessors, is more satirical than their recent titles, featuring campier characters. Character dialogue and mission briefings are the main sources of plot and world building. Environmental storytelling is still important, and the visual fidelity and increased level of detail make these easily the most evocative and interesting environments in the series. There seems to be a more robust past that will be fleshed out, but the plot and current events of Armored Core 6 are the focus for the storytelling, and all signs point toward plenty of intrigue and twists. The similarity to the storytelling of their other titles is that From Software is still relying on the player to pay attention, listen to what is being said, and more importantly, read between the lines. Their fantasy action RPGs are more about piecing together the ancient past, whereas Armored Core 6 follows the series' focus on dealing with understanding the truth of the present day. Following From Software tradition, cutscene and cinematics are minimal. Much of the story is delivered through in-game dialogue from the various characters, and boy are the characters fun. Characters like Michigan embodying the persona of a drill sergeant, and V2 Snail putting on the airs of a social elite are campy as hell.
This is an operation of my own design. Consider it a privilege to be called to participate.
They are wonderful, over-the-top voice performances with dialogue that gives a lot of character and builds the world of the game, while managing to not overstay its welcome. Characters like Handler Walter are more grounded, but the performance really fleshes him out, and he often serves as the straight man in conversations to let the more over-the-top performances stand out. The interpersonal drama between characters is also something that's distinct from their dark fantasy games, and it's fun to see From Software write these character interactions and banter. I confirmed that Frog Nation is handling the voice acting and translation for Armored Core 6, and I have to imagine that this collaboration was a fun change of pace. I'm really happy with what I've seen of the tone and story of Armored Core 6. Seeing how differently From Software is handling the storytelling in AC6 compared to their dark fantasy titles is a breath of fresh air, and for me, shows how intentional From Software is with their different titles. As I've said before, From understands the unique delights and role of the story in each of their titles, and how it intersects with the gameplay. They can make fantastical and opaque worlds where players explore the mythology of the world, like in Elden Ring and Dark Souls, and they can make satirical, hyper-capitalist worlds filled with intrigue where players try to decipher the truth, like in Armored Core. In both cases, the through line is asking the player to pay attention and give some critical thinking to what is being presented, and as with their other titles, this applies equally to the gameplay.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
As much as I enjoyed seeing the story and its presentation, the star of the show in Armored Core is the gameplay and mechanics. And like all of the other creators giving impressions, I have to address the elephant in the room. Is Armored Core 6 a fun game to play? Hell yes it is. It feels amazing to pilot an AC in this game. The movement is great, and as you jet around Quick Boost and Assault Boost, you can feel the speed and momentum, and when you cut the speed and throttle back, you can feel your AC strain to come to a halt. The weapons have appropriate heft and impact as you chew through weaker enemies and carefully dismantle more imposing ones. Coming under enemy fire is hectic, as massive cannons and barrages of missiles feel like an emergency as you desperately quick boost around them or rocket into the area to avoid destruction. Tying it all together are wonderful and detailed animations that help you feel like you're controlling a giant mech. And speaking of size, the sense of scale while playing feels incredible. They cannily start in a sprawling ruined city, giving a sense of your AC compared to the human scale as you fly over skyscrapers and trash highways as you battle against smaller MTs. which are simpler mechs than ACs that are used as grunts and to perform manual labor. The scale of the AC is then dwarfed by the gargantuan infrastructure of the coral mining facilities on the planet, and the massive automated machines used to run and protect them, looming over the shattered ruins of human civilization that once lived there. There has been plenty of discourse surrounding the game and how the last decade of making games might influence the design, and playing it has confirmed for me that this is an Armored Core game through and through. Of course, there are differences. The last decade of making games and modern standards were always going to affect the design of Armored Core 6, but the changes are filtered through it being an Armored Core game. There have been a few concerns about the gameplay mechanics that I would like to address. There was some concern that adding heals to the game would make it too easy. I assure you that's not the case. The enemy damage and overall challenge of each scenario is built around having heals. Any enemy can be a threat in AC6 if not dealt with, and responding poorly to particularly devastating attacks can quickly take an AC from full health to barely getting by in a matter of moments. Along with the ability to heal, there was concern about the checkpoint feature. Again, the missions seem built around having checkpoints, and they're being used sparingly and often to separate challenging sections or bosses where you're likely to need all your resources to get through it. I only changed my assembly mid-mission once, which I will discuss later, but I was happy to have the option to adjust to the challenge presented without necessarily starting over. There may be ways to abuse it, but all of the options mentioned above do seem to play into how many credits you ultimately end up earning in your rank on the mission, with these mechanics above lowering your credits earned in rank for when you do succeed if you use them. Perhaps the biggest point of debate was if there was a hard lock in Armored Core 6, and there is. You can lock your camera onto an enemy using target assist, however this comes at the cost of reduced precision. The reticule in the middle will not track enemies as well, and getting that reticule to the second stage lock-on where it turns red greatly improves your shot's landing, so making that harder does hamper your efficiency. It also comes at the cost of maneuverability, as you'll often want the freedom to move unchained around a particular enemy. That being said, it was useful on bosses, which of course brings us to bosses. They can be a real wall, quite literally, and the 3 bosses I saw were all meaningfully difficult challenges. During the opening presentation of the event, producer Ogura told us there would be a challenging mission called Operation Wall Climber that acts as a sort of skill check, featuring a boss called the Juggernaut. And a skill check it was, testing your understanding of building an AC as well as your skill in using your combat verbs to effectively fight the Juggernaut. But even before the Juggernaut, in the opening mission, Armored Core 6 makes sure you have a basic understanding of how to control and fight with your AC in your fight with the A-12HC helicopter. Armored Core 6 does not play around, and it wants you to leave the first mission knowing that you understand how to use your AC. Everyone I spoke with at the event, Armored Core newcomers and vets alike, were surprised to die a few times to the attack helicopter. I was not an exception to this rule, and I died a handful of times, plus a couple, to the opening boss. It was a good test though, as I could see with each destruction of my AC, a mistake I had made, and when I finally overcame the challenge, I felt confident that I had a good understanding of generally controlling my AC, and using the many options available at the right moment. The big lessons for me in the fight were effectively using the assault boost and understanding how stagger works. The assault boost rockets you forward in whatever direction you're looking at the cost of quickly using up your energy, a critical aspect of Armored Core that limits your ability to boost and fly through the air. There's actually more to it than that, but just know energy is basically stamina and was in fact the basis for stamina in Demon Souls. Making sure your stamina was adequate, you were in the right position against the helicopter, and deploying it at a time when you won't be unceremoniously shot out of the sky to perform a brutal melee strike was critical for me defeating the helicopter, and something I really enjoyed figuring out. And that was because melee would do massive impact damage to the helicopter. Similar to Posture and Sekiro, each weapon deals different amounts of impact damage to your AC and enemies, filling up a stagger meter. When your AC's meter or the enemy meter fills, the machine is staggered, causing it to stop moving and take critical damage for a time. Using the laser dagger would do a ton of impact damage to the helicopter, opening up to take massive damage for a short window. If the combat helicopter checked your understanding of controlling the AC, then the Juggernaut tested your ability to build the right AC for the job. Talk with any Armored Core veteran and they'll tell you that building your AC is really at the core of playing and enjoying these games. I won't spoil how I managed to solve the problem of the Juggernaut in the garage, but it was so satisfying to have it click. The stats in Armored Core are incredibly intimidating, and I don't recommend hitting the expanded stat menu for parts if your experience level is anything like mine, because it's just scary. But I didn't really need to look at them anyways because solving the Juggernaut required that I think about the scenario on a broad level and address the issues I was facing. One of the major choices for building an AC is what kind of legs you want to use, with each type being meaningfully distinct. Bipedal legs have a good carry weight and speed, reverse joint legs are lightweight but have good speed and a special jump that costs no energy and are good at quick boosting. Tetrapod legs are slower but can go into a hover mode and fire heavy weapons while doing so. Tank legs are slow but have a high carry weight, they can equip and fire heavy weapons while moving, and they can drift. The next choice I made was the right weapon for the job. Things like direction of fire, the speed of the enemy, and their kinetic, energy, and explosive defensive capabilities were all things I considered. You can equip up to 4 weapons, 2 arm and 2 back weapons, which in AC6 you're able to fire all at once if you would like. There is something so satisfying about pressing the triggers and bumpers down all at once and unleashing a barrage of death and destruction. Here's an anecdote about how I adjusted my build for another mission in Chapter 1. The mission featured cloaked enemies using guerrilla tactics to ambush me, and my build just wasn't good for it. My gun fired slowly, I had missiles equipped that had trouble tracking, even if I liberally used the scan button to find them. So I changed my assembly using what I had available. I equipped myself with a laser cannon on my back and a rapid-fired weapon in my right arm, and it was night and day. Those little cloaked bastards melted before me, and it was so satisfying to have thought myself through the challenge. This probably sounds like baby's first build to Armored Core veterans, but it's hard to overstate just how satisfying it is to mull these problems over and feel yourself becoming increasingly adept at responding to situations. Besides the legs and weapons, there's the core, head, arms, boosters, FCS, and generator to consider. It's overwhelming at first with how much depth there is, but AC6 does a good job of slowly introducing new elements through tutorial missions, which I highly recommend playing through as they become available. Eventually there are also different OSs you can choose from, which modify how you play in interesting ways. This gives you things like a boost kick, manual aiming, a quick turn, and a whole lot more that gives you more control on how you build and pilot your AC. Chapter 1 culminates with one final boss fight, and it looks like a final test on having a good understanding of the game in general. I didn't have time to overcome the boss, but watching those who did, it was a brutally challenging encounter that seems to close out the first chapter with a bang. Before wrapping this up, I have a few miscellaneous thoughts and bits of information. The big one is that the types of PvP confirmed are 1v1 elimination and 3v3 deathmatch, which will probably be wild in the first few weeks as everyone comes to learn Armored Core 6. Next we have AC customization. The color customization and emblem creation are something I didn't dive deep into during my limited time, but they look extremely robust and are something I'm sure I will spend hours on in the full release. Lore Hunter emblem, anyone? The arena where you fight simulations of other mechs and ranked matches is of course in the game as well, and is the main way in which you unlock new OS upgrades. I really enjoyed my time playing Armored Core 6. I'm not even really a huge mech person, but the game is just so much fun to play. It appealed to me in the same way as past Armored Core titles, but now with better controls, much better environments, and the top tier animations and visuals that I've come to expect by From Software. I think that for those who love the Souls games, this is an opportunity to come to a From Software series fresh again and enjoy the sink or swim challenging experience that trusts the player to engage with the gameplay and story. And for those Souls fans who love how From Software gives you the freedom to build a character practically any way you want, you will get even more out of Armored Core 6. August 25th cannot come fast enough for me. Since playing the game, I can't stop thinking about the missions and other ways I might be able to approach them and how I could improve my build. I need it back in my life. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you have any additional questions about the event, feel free to drop a comment and I'll do my best to answer. If you want more Armored Core 6 content, please subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on. I will also be covering Blasphemous 2 thoroughly when it drops the day before Armored Core 6, and I'll likely be covering the slew of Souls-like coming out this fall. There is a lot to look forward to. Thanks for watching.
However, on Rubicon, the embers continued to burn. Humanity would inevitably return to stoke the fire.